I'd like to call the school board meeting for January 19th, 2016 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please take the roll.
Ms. Langford?
Here.
Ms. Ellsbernd?
Here.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Barron?
Present?
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Here.
Ms. Newcomb?
Here.
Ms. Boson?
Here.
First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda? Motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson, second by Ms. Langford. Please vote. Motion is approved, 7-0. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from January 5th, 2016.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Newcomb, a second by Ms. Boson. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Where we do not have district recognitions this evening. So I'll move on to our consent items. Next item on our agenda is the list of consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishing to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities, character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. We appreciate your input. Ms. Boson, do you have the motion?
Yes, I have it. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $4,138,957.30.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Boson, a second by Ms. Ellsberg. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda is item E1, public hearing for an entry upgrade at Cattell Elementary School. Public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E1, public hearing for an entry upgrade at Cattell Elementary School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you introduce the matter?
I recommend that the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Studio Melee for an entry upgrade at Cattell Elementary School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
Thank you. We do have a presentation. I'll first ask for a motion and a second to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson, second by Ms. Boson, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Good.
Thank you, board. Okay, at Cattell Elementary, we are doing another entrance element to the school. This is an overall site plan, and as you see, it's a minimal, though very important addition to that front entrance. The front entrance will remain at the same location, just be configured in a different way. This is an existing floor plan. As most of you know, at Cattell, this is the main entrance into the building, and this is the current configuration and the spaces that will be impacted as part of the reconfiguration. This will be the new controlled entrance point with a new vestibule put in here where visitors will come into the reception area here. And once they're identified and receive the proper identification, then they can go into the building or see the principal. But all of these spaces will be upgraded as part of that work. You may remember, for those that have been there, it's a very small office area to begin with. This doesn't show real well, but this would be looking at the main entrance and from the parking lot area, and this would be that new entry area here. The things that we're going to gain here is that with this new entrance, with a dedicated area through the office, will be a much needed improvement at Cattell. And with that and the renovations of the spaces in that general office area, we're going to be able to realize some ADA compliancy that we don't have currently, whether it be in the counter, the reception counter, or the nurses' areas. Certainly will be a vastly improved area for staff, secretary, building secretary, and nurse and others. It'll also be an enhanced first impression of Cattell that they're going to notice right away. Be a very positive first impression. And they do not have a conference space now. The conferences that they have are normally held in the principal's office. So with that, as I know this sounds a little competitive or repetitive, but there's another summer project we're looking to start in June and complete in August. The project budget is $400,000, and again, this is another year one established project with the statewide penny. So with that, if there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address those.
Any comment from the board? No. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, so please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda is item E2, public hearing for a student drop-off at Weeks Middle School. Public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E2, public hearing for a student drop-off at Weeks Middle School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Dr. Ahart, would you present the matter?
I recommend the board hold a public hearing and approve the plans prepared by Shive Hattery for a student drop-off at Weeks Middle School.
Thank you. Do I have a motion and a second to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Anderson, a second by Ms. Newcomb. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda is item E3, public hearing for a student drop-off at Moulton Elementary. Public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E3, public hearing for a student drop-off at Moulton Elementary? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing. Dr. Ahart, would you present the matter?
I recommend the board hold a public hearing and approve the plans prepared by Shive Hattery for a student drop-off at Moulton Elementary School.
Thank you. Do I have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bozen, second by Ms. Ellsburn. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda is a monitoring report. It's item F1, monitoring report 4.1.2, student achievement, whether students possess the knowledge and skills to be self-directed and autonomous. We do have one comment from the community. I'd call Mr. Andrew Rasmussen up.
Good evening, Board. Andrew Rasmussen, 313 Southeast Sharon Ankeny, Des Moines Education Association President. As I was looking at this report and looking into, at the end of it, the response to the data from the report, I wanted to raise a question for your minds to think about. Beyond looking at the teachers and how they teach and how instruction is delivered when we respond to this data, you also might want to ask yourself how much of the student data reflects who is teaching compared to what is being taught and the curriculum that is being offered. I think one of the other things that we could think about when we look at responding to this data from students and their engagement level, as a middle school teacher, where you start to see that drop off in engagement, I knew that it was important every day for me to have a responsive classroom and curriculum besides my instruction abilities, to be able to be culturally proficient and responsive to the faces I saw in front of me in my classroom, as well as to make sure that the learning that happened in my classroom was student-driven, not driven by something the federal government or the state necessarily told me, but what the students showed me they needed. So one of the things you might want to consider moving forward is, do we need to radically rethink or ramp up what is being taught and bring in things like creativity, entrepreneurialism, really take a look at curiosity and imagination, effective communication, accessing and analyzing information, critical thinking and problem solving being taught in a very deliberate manner, rather than just hoping that it's going to be a side effect. Because I think that is the best way to respond to this data from students, is to make sure that we have student-driven learning happening in our classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will have a presentation. I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve item F1 before we have our presentation.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Ellsburn, second by Ms. Bozen. I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith for our presentation.
Yeah, Rob, if I may, this is, if just for the public's, for our audience at home and here in the boardroom, many years ago, prior to my arrival in the district, the board adopted graduate ends that were to guide the what happens in our schools, and those were very, very difficult to measure. A few years ago, our board reworked those graduate ends, went back, vetted those with the community, but reconfigured them in terms of board beliefs and then also student expectations. This report that you're receiving tonight is the first stab that the district's made at reporting out on these specific outcomes that the board has really had in place for quite some time, but we've not really had a means to measure them. So this is one of two reports. You'll receive another one in February where KPIs have not been identified in advance, because it's one of those, it's some of those areas that are very difficult to measure. So this is the first go round at it. So with that, I just wanted to set some context. Thanks, Matt.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Smith, and I'm the Chief Schools Officer for Des Moines. This report is, like Dr. Harrod said, is the first one. It's intriguing for me. I spend a lot of time looking at data in my role and interpreting the data on how my role could function differently to better support administrators, teachers, and ultimately students. And a lot of times what we do is we look at concrete, hard data and as a measure to how well we're doing our jobs and how we're supporting students. And this report is a much different take on that. It speaks to students, as you will see, ability to demonstrate critical thinking and problem solving, to make sound and reasonable judgments and decisions, to be creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial in their thinking, and also to understand and appreciate the attributes of physical and mental health well-being, all in an effort to be self-directed and autonomous. So just by reading that, this is not an Iowa assessment data point that you can just pull down. And there's no class that can be taught on this is where you're going to learn to be creative or this is where you're going to learn to be an entrepreneurial thinker. It's incumbent upon all of us to begin to utilize this verbiage and the intent and the desired effect of this student ends and these criteria to develop systems and opportunities for our students to demonstrate these skills. I've used this analogy with a lot of other folks before as we're looking at some of these data points. And then if you know me, I have to editorialize just about everything because I'm going to give you my opinion and talk to you about where I think this is going to benefit kids. And I'm going to use, if you haven't seen this movie, you got to watch it. All right? It's Evan Almighty. And there's a scene in Evan Almighty. Stay with me, Terry Caldwell Johnson. There's a scene in Evan Almighty where one of the characters' husband, is she's at a table and she's talking to Morgan Freeman, who plays God. And she's asking Morgan Freeman, God, about how she can be more loving. And Morgan Freeman's answer in this movie is, when people need to feel loved, do they think that God just zaps them with that warm, fuzzy feeling? Or does he give them opportunities to love others and to be loved themselves? So I use that as an example to tell you that this report and the qualities and criteria that we have set forth for our kids is about opportunities to demonstrate these things. Again, there's no class that you can walk in and say, you are now check the box because you're now an entrepreneurial thinker. That's not the way that is. But I will tell you the criteria that we've put forth to aspire to is the right conversation, and it is the right data to be looking at, because we desire this in all of our classrooms and in all of our buildings, and we desire this quality in all of our leaders to develop the opportunities for our staff to engage in the same conversation. So that being said, I'm gonna move forward. This monitoring report focuses on personalization of learning for students. It helps them to discover who they are and what their individual talents are. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we are giving students opportunities to discover their passion for who they are created to be. That's what school's all about. We talk a lot about test scores, but ultimately at the end of the day, we want students to be the people that they were created to be, and we have to give them opportunities to engage in those activities. I would be remiss if I did not mention that standards reference grading is absolutely an attempt to do that. It is an opportunity for our grading practices to reflect opportunities for students to engage in critical thinking and problem-solving skills, to choose to engage in a level 3 and a level 4 task as often as possible. So while we're going to talk about Gallup data points and activities and participation thereof, I felt important to include the fact that SRG is absolutely representative of the opportunities for students to engage in critical thinking and problem solving through each class. It's at the core of SRG. The first data point I'd like to look at and to analyze is within the Gallup poll is engagement. Engagement is defined as the involvement in, enthusiasm for school. And so this report is built on a few data points in terms of the Gallup. It's engagement, hope, and entrepreneurial aspirations. And with each data point, there are some specific questions that we felt reflected the intent and the desired effect of this policy of students being self-directed and autonomous. These questions, we felt, demonstrated students' ability to demonstrate critical thinking and problem-solving skills, as well as exhibit creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial thinking. And so what you see before you is there's going to be 3 different looks at this data. The first is the comparison of Des Moines Public Schools to that of the overall U.S. mean. And so you can see that we are just slightly 3.89 compared to 3.90 overall in our engagement index compared to the overall U.S. mean. Of all the other, and I believe there's 25 school districts that Gallup uses this same data set with that we're being compared to.
I would just add to remind everyone, the Gallup student poll is given to students 5th grade through 12th grade.
The other aspect of this, when you read these questions, at this school I get to do what I do best every day. I have fun at school. In the last 7 days, I have learned something interesting at school. This speaks to purpose. It speaks to purpose not only of a specific activity or the lesson, it speaks to purpose of the school day. Are we connecting with students and who they are and what their skill sets are? Are we helping them to find those? And it speaks to, more importantly, I think, a purpose in life and being engaged not only in and of the school, but also within our community. The school day, as Andrew mentioned, it's much, much more than just test scores and assessments. That's a part of it, and that's a small sliver of it. The most important part is that we are helping students to find their purpose and who they are supposed to be in life. We feel like these 3 questions help exhibit that. Here's another look at it. It's divided up and gives a comparison by grade level. What you will see is that in grades 5, we began at an overall engagement index at 4.31, and then we began to slowly decline a little bit. As you get to 12th grade, you see a little bit of a tick up. We'll talk more a little bit about that, that decline here in a little bit. Another way of looking at it is to be able to disaggregate the scale itself. I thought this was important data for us to look at so that we were able to look at the strongly agree versus the strongly disagree and how student responses were disaggregated out on those same 3 questions. At this school, I get to do what I do best every day. I have fun at school. And in the last 7 days, I have learned something interesting at school. The column that we want to pay particularly attention to is the strongly agree on the far right. That 24% of our students strongly agree, at this school I get to do what I do best every day. When you read it that way, it looks very profound. 29% of our students strongly agree that they have fun at school. The next data set is about hope. And again, in the same format, there are a number of questions that were asked within each category, in engagement and with hope and with entrepreneurial aspirations. And we chose some of the questions to highlight in this particular monitoring report, again, that we think that most accurately and best reflect the criteria and the graduate ends that we put forth. I can think of many ways to get good grades. And I can find many ways around a problem. Again, you can see our average compared to the national average. And we felt that these 2 questions provided us with some level of quantitative data depicting students' ability to demonstrate critical thinking and problem-solving skills, as well as exercise sound reasoning in making complex choices. Again, there's that distribution of grades. And you will see a similar trend. We begin fairly high at the 5th grade level, and it begins to steady decline a bit, and a tick up in 12th grade. And then the student response disaggregated by strongly agree through strongly disagree. Again, this is a 1 through 5 scale, and so there are 5 categories to choose from. A little bit better data there in terms of 46% of our students strongly agree that they can think of many ways to get good grades. Entrepreneurial thinking. Obviously, we chose this set of data as well as these questions to highlight and hopefully reflect what we think is data where students are exhibiting creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial thinking as outlined in the data set. In this particular data set, we have a little bit larger. Our scores is higher than the average U.S. mean. Another look at it through grades distributions. Same trend. Again, some of the most important data that we can look at is that strongly agree category. 16% of our students strongly agree that I will invent something that changes the world. These questions hit home for me. My 3 children attend Des Moines Public Schools, and every day I have the opportunity to take my oldest daughter, to Merrill on my way into work. And after reading these data sets and looking at these questions from the Gallup, I have found that I have switched my questions from, how'd you do on that test? Can you tell me what standard you were being measured on? And, the questions that you would probably think that I would ask my child in my role. And I've begun to ask about, how do you feel about your ability to make a difference in the world? Because at the heart of it, again, isn't this the right question that we should be asking our kids? The problem with it is, and this is why you know it's right, measuring that is not necessarily always quantifiable. Sometimes it's qualitative. But it should never stop the conversation, and we should never stop the search to be able to quantify as much as we possibly can in connecting those quantifiable data sets to the quality of education that we're providing our kids. In addition to, this is also a Gallup data set. We thought to include it because we also wanted to provide data on our participation numbers in activities, clubs, and activities district-wide. What you'll see here is Gallup also asked a similar question. I am involved in at least one activity, such as a club, music, sport, or volunteering. And you can see our average compared to the U.S. overall mean, as well as the grade distribution, and of course, disaggregated by strongly agree versus strongly disagree. What you'll notice down there under strongly agree is 61% of our students strongly agree that they are involved in at least one activity, sport, club, or volunteering opportunity throughout the school year. Here shortly, I'll show you some of our own Des Moines data that we pull from Infinite Campus that it actually hits that right on the head when you look at our middle school and high school activity percentage results for student participation is exactly 61% there as well too. So again, same trend where we begin very high in 5th grade at 4.28, and then we begin a slowly, steadily decline as students progress through the grade levels. I've got 3 slides to depict again, just to give you an example of some of the middle school activities participation. I do have, before you look at this data and say, well, we dropped considerably, I want to give you a caveat. this is really good data. This is not apples to apples. This is actually apples to oranges. What this demonstrates is currently in the 2015-2016 school year under athletics, you have 18.70% students participating. That's compared to all of last school year. So what you have in 15-16 is only up to date because of the timeliness of the report. We have not included all winter and all spring athletic activities. So as you look across the board at music, for example, halfway through the school year, we've already nearly doubled the participation rates in music than we have in all of last school year. So this is for middle school. High school. Again, same caveat there, apples to oranges here. And the combined results of middle school and high school. It just gives a different take on it. And there's that 61% that's reported by our middle school and high school students, which is also reflected in our 5th grade through 12th grade Gallup results in the same data set. I'm encouraged by each of these participation numbers in our students. And of course, we chose students' participation in activities, clubs, organizations, opportunity to volunteer, because those are the opportunities that students have. We talk a lot about creating situations and environments where students' passions and their skill set come together. And many times, what I even brought the book, it's called The Element. It's what Ken Robinson refers to it as. When you find your element, it's when your skill set and what you're good at and your passion for doing that come together, and then it's no longer work. It's no longer something that you have to do. It's something that you're motivated and inspired to do, and you aspire others to engage with it as well. And that's what we want school to be. We want every student to be able to find his or her element. Again, giving them opportunities to think critically, to use sound reasoning and judgment, to care for others. Those are the attributes that we want, and that's why I love the graduate ends, the way it's written. And again, just to be repetitive, because I think I need to emphasize this point, that's why you know it's right when it's hard to measure it. The easiest thing to do is to give someone a written assessment and say, do that, and that's where you are. The hard thing to do is take students where they are and discover where they want to be and give them opportunities so that they can grow in that area and where their passion and where their desires are, so that when they leave our buildings, regardless of where they choose, whether it's a career, whether it's 4-year education, regardless of what it is, that they feel like they are doing what they were created to do, that their purpose in life is being fulfilled, because that's what creates a community. Not folks that feel relegated to do what they're equipped to do. There should be no ceiling on this. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm looking forward to having your feedback and be able to develop KPIs for this moving forward, just as we've done with the other areas of student achievement. Just to give you another example of some of the activities that we do have listed there, you'll find most of these are secondary activities, although we do have a number of clubs at the elementary level, and again, that's another area of focus as we're moving forward. in elementaries with our community partnerships and some activities there at the elementary school level. If you remember a couple of years ago, we began our push towards engaging and expanding middle school activities, and I think we're seeing the results of that. It's the right investment, and you'll see a tick up in achievement, which I believe you've seen in many of your monitoring reports in middle schools, and there's a reason for that. When students are engaged in the activities that they have a passion for, school becomes no longer the traditional thinking of school. It becomes an opportunity for me to be who I want to be and who I need to be so that I feel like everything is working in my life. Some of our next steps. I chose these two quotes as next steps because I think Tony Wagner, the author of Creating Innovators, is brilliant, number one, so I can relate to him. But secondly, because I think he depicts accurately what we all want. We want to create environments where students are successful innovators, where they feel like they've mastered the ability to learn on their own and in the moment and then apply that knowledge in new ways. And the moment refers to the opportunities that we are providing. There should be multiple moments within a school day for a student to feel like he or she is mastering those skills and being able to apply them in any situation. And then conversely, on the other side, our responsibility as educators is to listen well, empathetically, to ask good questions, to model good values, and to help individuals more fully realize his or her talents. It's not about teaching standards, although that is a big part of SRG, and I don't want Noelle to cringe when I say that. It's about teaching kids to find out who they are, and we use standards as a way of measuring academic success, but there's a lot more to it than just academic standards. And I think all of us would agree that this is the right conversation to have. Lastly, I wanted to show you this because this was a slide that came in late last week. And I thought it did a wonderful job of depicting the shift that I am responsible for and moving in all of our classrooms. I'm certainly appreciative of what Mr. Rassman had to say, and I agree with him. The shift that's articulated on this slide is my responsibility, and it's a desire that I think we all have for our students to be involved in classrooms where they are engaged in critical thinking and problem solving with their peers, and it's facilitated by a teacher. Our teachers are doing a phenomenal job, and the results that we're getting is a direct result of the work that they are putting in. But it doesn't end there. We have to continue to get better and continue to look for opportunities to engage students more fully in every core area, in every elective area, and in all opportunities and aspects of school. The holistic approach to education is the right approach. I believe at this time we do have a video that we'd like to show you. Tim?
My education has kind of given me the building blocks for my future.
My education has taught me to be on my toes at all times.
I'm in accelerated math, so we go at a much faster pace. I need to be challenged. So we're doing algebra, and the normal class is like doing fractions. So like I would have probably been bored out of my mind.
I've learned to do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise had I not been here.
It's taught me what it's like to be a progressive student in society.
Learning how to work with others and working alone.
Sometimes I'd prefer to work in a group, and other times I might prefer to work independently.
I lived in Chicago at one point in time, so I say you have a lot more opportunities to do here than you do there, which I'm really grateful for.
If you don't get to make your own choices when you're a kid, how are you going to make your choices when you're an adult?
I'm involved in everything. There's not one thing I don't do.
I'm in Brody After Hours.
Drama helped me with reading and being an actor.
I'm part of student government.
There's swim, drama, as in theater.
Movement 515.
I play about 6 or 7 other instruments.
Theater, IHSSA, which is Iowa High School Speech Association.
IHSSA.
IHSSA and Linklaters.
I also sing.
To sing and perform and really express myself.
Theater and student government, those are probably the two biggest.
Theater, which I love being on stage. I'm also on dance team.
I am also a treasurer for senior board.
I'm also in Stand for the Silent. I'm also a part of Linklaters.
I believe that's about it. Oh, and Linklaters.
You have to be really critical of yourself and your time.
Because now I have to write stuff on a schedule and I have to be there at a set time.
You have to be responsible for your actions and you have to be responsible for others' actions also. So you're learning leadership and you're learning like development as in working with others.
I've learned how to take control of a situation that maybe I don't like or don't understand and change it for the better. I've also learned that sometimes I can't change a situation and I have to roll with that.
It marks all my mistakes now so I don't make them later on in the future.
Because if you practice, you won't exactly get perfect, but practice makes progress.
I have to remember that I am allowed mistakes because mistakes make me a better person.
I try to work, I try to read, I try to keep myself occupied to keep me out of trouble. Because if you get in trouble, it can do things to your mental health and your mental well-being.
I think that it's important for us to take care of our bodies so that we can feel good about ourselves. What gives you hope is just believing in yourself and like believing that you can do something that you never thought you could do before.
I believe in myself. When I say hope, it makes me feel better.
I have hope that I will go to college.
You believe that if you try hard that good things are going to happen.
I have hope that I can be a successful leader.
If you believe in yourself, you try, and if you don't try it again.
Hope. A better look for tomorrow.
See, that's what hope means.
School has been really great. I'm actually like a little bit sad to leave, but I'm also going into a new world where there's many opportunities and a chance for me to grow. So I don't plan on stopping here. I plan on going further.
To major in pre-law, political science, urban studies, and a minor in music. So yes, I will be in school forever.
Hopefully go on to be a chemist or like a science teacher or something like in the science field.
And that's my biggest goal is I want to change the way our society is now. And I feel like that's the most effective way to do it is by being in the law.
Because I love doing science and I love the experiments and how like if you add a little bit of this and certain measurements and stuff, it's very fun.
I feel like politics is such a game and it's so fun.
My plans are actually to become a counseling psychologist, to work with the next generation or youth.
Definitely want to go into engineering, possibly chemical engineering.
And I want to specifically get a career in clinical psychology to become a therapist, and specifically to adolescents.
Either I want to be a producer or I want to be a professional musician.
Photography person or a journalist.
I probably want to be somewhere in the government field.
I've wanted to be the president ever since I was 3. I know it has a lot of responsibility, but I'm willing to take that responsibility.
A lot of times students are told like, you can only do this or you can only do that, and I want to tell them that's not true. You can do other things.
Everyone has their battles and everyone has their stories, but we're all here together and we're all have the same goal.
My time with Des Moines Public Schools has taught me that you have a family no matter where you're at, whether it's support with stuff going on at home, with your classes, anything. There's teachers and there's staff in the buildings who care and will help you.
I've been in other school districts, but Des Moines Public Schools is the one school district I've been in that cares a lot about their students.
High school is what you make it, but honestly, if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to get the experience. If you get to know your teachers, you get to know the students, it's actually a really great place to be.
East High actually cares about their students and they make an effort to show their kids that we care about you and we want you to succeed out there in the world.
DMPS and East High really focus on the students and how successful they want them to be, and they really strive to
like make Des Moines better. Not only are we individual schools, but we're Des Moines Public Schools, and we're proud of who we are, and we're all together in one community.
Top that, Smith.
Sir?
Top that.
There's nothing I can say to actually top that. But after watching that video, I think about all the different data points that I could have gone back and added after seeing that video, and things that I want to begin to measure now, because I know after, and that's the key to this is what we're measuring now at a state or federal level is not that. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on that, but that doesn't make this conversation any less relevant. I think it actually makes it more relevant and more important for us to continue down this road and to continue looking at this monitoring report as an opportunity to change and shift the culture of what we have on campuses so that students can be the people that they were created to be. And so I'm privileged and honored to be the first to present this monitoring report for its first time. And I'm looking forward to your comments and your feedback and how we can improve this moving forward.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the depth of this report and the narrative and video provided are very helpful. I know that both you and Tom referenced that what you're presenting are not KPIs per se, and I know that that's an issue of concern somewhat to the board. Can you kind of talk through the process to not present KPIs this time around, and what you're looking for from us, so that the next time we have a report of 4.1.2 that we can effectively call these KPIs or call something else KPIs.
Sure, you bet. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to focus on this graduate ends and the interpretation by the board of what this policy is, so that we can begin to present KPIs that we think more accurately reflect this. The interpretation of the policy is the next step, and I think we already had the opportunity to go through that with some of the other student achievement data monitoring reports, and it would be wonderful to take on that same challenge with this particular report itself.
Great. Well, I'll open it up to questions, comment from the board. Ms. Langford.
Before getting to the discussion about KPIs, first off, thank you. I'm in a non-partial way. It's really exciting to see a lot of those students coming from East High, as a grad. But also just because I think sometimes the perception that some of our schools get in our district, and that all of our schools actually are turning out some phenomenal leaders, and I really appreciate the vision for developing leaders, right? So thank you for that. A couple questions that I did have. For starters, was the Gallup, did it poll all students, or was it just a sample?
It was grades 5 through 12, all students.
Okay.
The N size, I believe, it hovered right around that 16,000 student number. Yes.
Okay. And then did it break down the student responses around engagement based on race, class, and gender?
No, ma'am. That data is not provided. It's not broken down in that way.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I do think in terms of feedback, I think that's important. I'd be very interested to see, and I would hope that they would still be as positive, but I'd be very interested to see what the responses of our students look like in terms of hope and engagement for our poorer students, for our students of color, and in terms of gender lines as well. I think that that information is important. I think it's good to look at the collective numbers, but we sometimes, when you break things down, it tells a deeper story and a more full story. And so I think that information's important.
You bet. We can continue to ask those questions. We actually did ask that question of Gallup, and the response that we got was that it would require, because it's an anonymous survey, and so by divulging even students' race or ethnicity on that we would require a release from every student, a signed release from parents to divulge that. And so we can continue to ask that question to see if that's a possibility, but because we also thought of it the exact same thing, that would be super helpful for us.
I believe we can get that if we have that in mind on the front end and how we set up the data collection, for sure. And I agree.
I was going to say, what's the benefit to doing it with Gallup versus doing our own poll as a district?
The sound research base and ability to make
Credibility.
comparisons. Yeah, credibility.
Okay. And then I just had a question about the engagement. It seems like we had a lot of, overall, when you looked at the points, everything was generally above 3, but it was interesting to see the decline in engagement, obviously from elementary school to high school. And I guess the first part of my question is, from your angle, what do you think contributes to our students' decrease in engagement as they progress through high school? I think it'd be interesting to look at that data also broken down in terms of race and socioeconomic status. And then also, is that a national trend? I could assume it may be, but is it?
It is a national trend, and that decline that you see in each of the Gallup data points in terms of engagement, hope, and entrepreneurial aspirations, and then a slight tick up at the 12th grade year. I don't have some data that tells me that this is why that is the way it is. What I can tell you is that our analysis of it speaks to, I'm going to refer to Ken Robinson again, a researcher and educational activist, regarding one of his TED Talks and some articles that he's published regarding schools kill creativity, right? So when you think about the idea, and what he means by that is schools sometimes across the country can focus on rote memorization and just this assessment versus that assessment versus looking at a holistic approach, which is where we're measuring around what students' aspirations are for the future and what sort of hope do they have beyond high school or beyond grade school.
Sure.
And I think what we have reflected here, and again, this is my opinion, so I take this, Ms. Langford, as you asked me, so I'm going to give you my opinion, that what is reflected here is that at 5th grade, you have students that are excited about all the possibilities in the world that are out there. And as they begin to grow in age and in grade level, and society begins to happen, they lose some of that hope. They lose some of that. Things become realistic, and we have yet to find a way that we can continue to foster and inspire the imagination and the creativity. Those are values that we want to afford and provide opportunities to cherish and to demonstrate that that's what school actually is about, and that having an imagination doesn't end after 5th grade. Matter of fact, it should spark opportunities for students to be even more creative and more innovative and more imaginative as the grade levels progress and as they get older. And so that's kind of actually the impetus behind expanding middle school opportunities many years ago to create activities for students where they're engaged at the elementary school level to feed into the middle school level that would in return feed into the high school activities, so that students that are engaged, that have a passion or desire for music, that they have not only those opportunities each grade level, but the opportunities become even more expansive and more in depth, and students can dig deeper and deeper into their passion. That was a long answer to your question. But I don't have a specific answer for that other than to say I think there's something to the aspect that we are still recovering from the old traditional ways of doing things and shifting our focus on qualitative data that talks about students' engagement and their hope and their ability to see this as a value added in schools and not something to be tossed aside so that we can learn English or math. Those aspects of imagination and creativity are there as well.
Final question, and then I'll pause. But is there any looks at how, because I know one of the district's focus is cultural proficiency, and so how do we tie that focus in with student engagement? because I know, and granted, just from experiences, I think oftentimes who we target and how we target students for activities is intertwined with how we view students and their capabilities, right? And so I'm just wondering how we're thinking about that and engaging with students, particularly since we're talking about student activities, clubs, and organizations, what that looks like on a district level, or actually really within our schools, because it's probably happening differently in each school.
It's significant. Continuing that cultural awareness around knowing what your cultural identities are as a person, and the value that brings to a school system, to a classroom, to a district, to a community. And again, placing those cultural identities as a value add is something that we can never do enough of. And so you're right, when we talk about engagement and students having energy and enthusiasm for what's taking place, it begins with knowing that the folks across the table from you value who you are as a person, value your gender, value your identity, your cultural, your race. All of those things are value adds to the conversation for this to be a community that is absolutely hell-bent on caring about one another and raising the standard for all of us to excel and to achieve.
In regards to how we monitor that with the extracurricular activities, we actually track all of that at building level by all the different subgroups.
Okay.
So we have ways to look to see who are we missing out on, even by not just by total participation, but why is this activity only attracting middle-income white kids, or why, what I mean? So to better inform, okay, what is it? What are we missing? Because obviously this opportunity is not welcoming for some reason to a particular segment of the student population, and then being able to be more critical at the building level about what needs to change there to make sure that it's a genuine opportunity for all the students and not just something that's on a menu.
Right, so it's awesome to know that we're collecting data around that. That makes me very genuinely excited to know we're looking at that. I guess my question is really digging into then, so I know we have cultural proficiency, and I'm not positive, maybe this might be a better question for our equity coordinator, but I know, from what I understand, all teachers have to go through a class a year. Is that what it looks like?
There's a module.
There's a module a year
It's a spiraling
so continually
curriculum,
every year.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering if there's conversations about how we target and engage students to afford access to all students for all activities, if that makes sense. If that's a part of the conversation or a part of the thought process in how we engage our students.
I
don't think that in particular is part of the training that we currently have.
Sure.
No.
But
not that it won't be.
For sure, and I appreciate the question because the cultural proficiency training and the continuum that is there, as we talk about, which is the absolute truth. It's an inside-out process. It's being honest with yourself about your own biases and the things that you bring to the table before you can begin to value and recognize the diversity of everybody else and their biases that they bring to the table. And so, again, and I know we've spoken about this before, and so, again, this is the right conversation to have because that's not a box you can check. We have got to continue to connect those conversations with activities, connect those conversations of cultural proficiency with hope, with engagement, with instruction. Matter of fact, they precede the conversations of instruction and assessment. They don't follow.
That's a good way to put it. Are those connections, my question, are those connections being made beyond that module into how we teach, how we engage, how we outreach, how we view our students?
Exactly, because otherwise it could be seen, has the potential of being seen as just another program or training like Achieve 3000.
Exactly.
And that's not what this is. It's a value system.
Thank you.
Additional comment? Ms. Anderson?
Hi, thanks for the video. It was great. I love hearing what the kids are doing and how excited they are about the different programs that are available for them. So many more than when I went to school, and I love how they can create. They just create their own too. So I think that's really neat. Just saw, like the Movement 515 and some of those really creative clubs. It just seems like every student has a club they can be involved in, or if they don't, they can make up their own. Yeah. So I like that they have that freedom. And I do think that this is the most important work, but sometimes the most important work is the hardest work. And as you said, we're still developing. Like we don't have any KPIs, and we're developing. We're in that kind of development process of this. So I don't think I would be able to vote yes because we don't have like a system in place. Even though I realize this isn't a test that they're taking, but we need to figure out how to measure in some way. I feel. Yeah.
The response I would have to that is that what we need to do tonight is to decide if what Matt and the district has given us is a reasonable interpretation of that policy for us to decide on for tonight. The discussion that we're having is about, are these KPIs good enough going forward? Are there things that should be changed, added? Deanna had some great points for that, but in the reasonable interpretation realm, I guess I'm going to think that it, for me, I think it's hit on those subpoints right now to understand where the district is going, and I believe you marked it emerging and partially compliant. And I think that is a reasonable assessment from the data you've given us. So that would be how I would respond to this data.
Ms. Boson.
I guess I have it on. I would have to agree. We knew when we gave these, when we went very beginning student ends, these were going to be the hardest ones to measure because it is very difficult. There's no test to take. There's no whatever. It's a culture almost embedded within our district. And we always have, we really didn't have KPIs before. When we first started monitoring, it was always, are we covering what they were being asked to do? And I believe in this case too, that they demonstrated some of the things that we've asked for. And is it a KPI? Is it the story from the kids? Is it the movement 515? Are all the things that we're doing in the district part of, are we monitoring that we're giving the opportunity? Is it a reasonable interpretation? I think that's somewhere where it's not cut and dried on everything. It's not a cut score. It's not this. So this one is the most difficult one. But based on what we're seeing and knowing what's going on in the district and what was been presented, and the increased involvement in getting more kids engaged, for me, I think it's covered what I need to be saying, that we're moving the district. Are we doing is the district doing what we've asked them to do? Creating that culture for this. Sorry, I can't talk very well. So.
Ms. Langford.
My response to that is this isn't, and so this may be an opportunity to think about how we're communicating as a board in terms of what our KPIs mean. But from what I've understood at this point, our role is to monitor, observe. One of the main ways that we govern in our terms of oversight is we have information that's presented to us from our district. And then as a board, we set forth our key performance measures, how we view whether this is acceptable or not. Recognizing that you didn't have them in the past, and that everything that's been communicated to me since we've been on this board is that we now have measures, and this is what we've asked them to do, and this is how we judge the information that's been presented to us about whether we've been successful in our ends or not. And for me, it's a broader conversation than just this particular report. And I know that we've talked about how all the other monitoring reports up to this point have had a KPI attached. But my question is moving forward, particularly because I still haven't seen a list of what they all look like moving forward. And that's okay if we're not at that stage in the process yet. But I think it's important as we're developing and moving to be consistent in what our measures are, especially if that's what we said that's what we want to do and that's where we're moving. And so one of my questions is, are the reports coming forward down the pipeline? Are there KPIs created for those? Because I think that that's important as well. And even if it's just this report, I understand that it's qualitative data and that it is harder to measure, right? But I think also, as somebody mentioned earlier, there are pieces in here or pieces in what we are presented with that are the sound basis of what could be a performance measure, in addition to some of the things that we've discussed tonight. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to develop something. It may be a little harder, and it may be broad to encompass some flexibility, speaking that this is something that's a little bit more qualitative than quantitative, but possible. And if we're moving in a direction where we as a board want to be accountable to a measure and be consistent, then I think that's important to have that. And I'm also at a space where I'm thinking I would like to postpone judgment on this, not because the data itself doesn't appear to be successful, but for the sake of consistency moving forward, do we have the measures in place that we said we want to have as a board?
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
So I have just a couple of questions. Matt and I had a nice chat earlier today.
Yes, ma'am.
About this, and I appreciate the effort that was put into this. I think we're getting there. I mean, I'm optimistic that we now at least have a framework that we can launch from. I think before we had nothing, so we were just sort of stabbing in the dark. So I feel like we at least now have a framework that we can sort of decide, yeah, this is sort of it, or no, it's not, and we need to go a different direction. So, I mean, I think we've, made progress, so that's definitely good. Help me understand the context that was set for this survey. Was there any explanation given to the students before they moved into it? Help me just sort of figure out how it was framed for the students before they began the process.
Well, the communication is done primarily through Gallup, and it's set up through the student email account, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, is that right, Mary? In terms of the communication that went out?
I don't think so.
For the students, just through the district,
Hey,
because
Tasha.
they don't even know who the students are. Yeah, you could ask the expert here.
You want to answer that question? Please, yeah.
Yeah.
Sit next to me, Todd.
Good evening. I'm Tim Hodges.
Tim, sorry,
Yeah,
Tim.
Tim Hodges with Gallup. I've just been a proud teacher back there with your answers, though. You hit them all, so that's how I would have answered. The student survey is actually set up, and it's administered in a lab environment, so any communication about what is this survey and why are you doing it, and that kind of thing would be from the lab administrator, the person in the media center when the students take the survey. And as was mentioned earlier, there's no student ID or login of any kind. It's just the first item shows up on the screen, and then when that student's completed, it's 5 minutes or so to do the survey. Then it just rolls to the beginning of the survey, and the next student comes in. So any communication would have come from the district to the students in that lab environment. The intro text at the beginning of the survey is very straightforward. It just says, here's some questions about your experience in school, and jumps right into it.
So nothing was created for anybody to say, to sort of cue people up. The students read it off the screen before they started. There was an administrator there that actually helped to move the students through. But outside of that, there was no other dialogue that talked about what this was for, what it meant, how it was going to be used, or any of that.
Not supposed
Not directly from Gallup, because we don't have the student
But from the
contact
district, I
information,
guess that's
but-
my question. So was there
No,
any
ma'am.
of that? None of
No,
that?
ma'am.
Okay. That's helpful.
Right, sure.
I mean, that's
It was-
important. Yeah, well, that's important because
Absolutely.
of consistency, building to building, class to class, grade level to grade level. So that's why I really wanted to make sure I understood that, because it's one thing to go in sort of with this context set here, and it's another thing to go into it completely cold and just reading what's on the screen and responding accordingly.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, ma'am. There was no frame
Okay.
presented for this.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing, and I think Deanna touched on this, I think it's really important to note the trends, elementary to middle to high school. And I don't know that there should be anything that we saw in there that was surprising. We know that by the time kids get to 8th grade, that's when things start getting a little crazy for them anyway. And so if you really track every single one of these, you can see that, by 8th grade, we're definitely on that downward spiral, and then you get to high school and you have that other 8th to 9th grade transition, which for different kids means different things. So I think there's something to be said about that. I don't know that we're different than anybody else, But I do think it really just sort of, in my mind, affirms what I think I already knew about just those really critical transitions that happen from grade level to grade level. And I guess if we could figure out how to smooth that out and make it better, we'd all be really rich people. But I just think it's something that we always have to keep in the back of our minds about ways that we can really help better manage, how those transitions are taking place and what that means for students. My other comment, and I'm so glad Deanna brought this up, but the whole notion of disaggregating the data, I feel like we have a false positive here. I think if we were to disaggregate this data, and as you begin to look at student achievement trends and other trends that we see in this district, if you were to disaggregate this data, I think that you would begin to see some very specific and very defined differences from different racial backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, and different areas of class. So I think being able to disaggregate that really will help us to figure out how this data informs other things that are happening in the district. So I think if there's a way that we can get there, I think that will make this even more meaningful, because I don't know that it means anything to me outside of the aggregate right now. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention, going to the entrepreneurial aspiration, if you look at all of the others, we're, high 3s, low 4s, and you get to that entrepreneurial aspiration and we're in the 2s, and I know that that's consistent with what's happening across the country. But I also think it informs, our conversations around what students, see and what they experience, and so many students don't experience things that are entrepreneurial. Their parents work a job. They don't have a business. And so I think there are things about that we can really use to inform our decisions about how we begin to sort of generate and create that entrepreneurial aspiration that they may not see and may not experience other places, but could see and experience in our classrooms. So almost to Andrew's point, how do we begin to create those opportunities that allow people or students to see, I could really be doing this and be my, really create my own destiny, as opposed to responding to what somebody else wants me to do and showing up at a job every day. So I think that one, of all of these, I really think, forces me to think, what can we be doing differently in this district to really help begin to create sort of a new normal for our students that they wouldn't typically see. So those would be my comments. And I feel like we don't have KPIs, but I feel like, again, going back to where we were with this from the very beginning, it's sort of a different measure. And as you and I talked about, the qualitative piece is just really, it's hard. But I do appreciate the video. I think it was sort of that anecdotal information that helped me to sort of feel like, okay, I think I get this. But we got work to do, but we've made some progress, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, actually, let Ms. Newcomb first.
Yep.
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to get all this information put together and present it to us, as well as the video. It was fun. I agree with Deanna and Terry with the reasons they brought up that we really need to be looking at, which we have been this year. But I wouldn't be myself if I wouldn't ask school level data as well, if that's something that we can look at, particularly when I think like Central Campus has lots of unique opportunities, and I'm assuming they're in this data as well.
Absolutely, but it's not based on Central Campus. They don't have their own data set because they're a part of the programs of the comprehensive schools.
Yeah, that's just the student experience.
Yes, ma'am.
Is slightly different.
That's taken into account, absolutely.
It is taken into account.
Well, so let me back up.
Sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
I think it is because there's no frame for when students their responses. So if they considered their coursework and the elective or the class that they chose here at Central Campus, then they would have responded in that manner. Does that make sense? It's hard for me to know if they think about the ag science as I get to do what I love every day. It could be for some kids, but I'm not going to know that for sure.
Well, I think it would be interesting to see you pull that out and see, particularly since they have such unique programs that, they run a radio show, they have TV, production. So I think that would be really interesting. But of course, I would like to see it at school levels.
Sure.
Just to see how we're doing and really kind of get into that deeper too. So
Yes, ma'am.
again, thank you very
Thank you.
much for
Thank you for your comments.
doing that. Thoughts?
Ms. Ellsburn.
I was just going to, back to what I had mentioned earlier, not saying that we should stifle any conversation. I appreciate how Terry articulated that we have a good start, a good jumping off spot here. I believe that this is listed as an action item on the agenda. Therefore, it is an action item because the agenda was not amended. So I guess my point is that in its form right now, I believe it is an acceptable interpretation. I do believe we do have more work in defining some of those things that were mentioned, and I think it is a very worthwhile conversation to continue having, as Matt mentioned many times. So my intention was not to stifle any further conversation, not to say that this is what it should be from here on out, but that for our first go, it was really a good place to start, and I appreciate that we're having these conversations and everyone's ideas for making it better next time.
Ms. Langford.
Maybe it would be helpful for me to understand what is a KPI and what's the purpose of a KPI in our role of what we do.
Let me take a stab at that. So, first of all, for those who aren't completely immersed in the fine art of school boards and school boarding, or for that matter, business or any... Yeah, it's all right. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. The purpose of a KPI is to multifold. One, to provide both the board and the district an objective set of criteria to monitor progress. With all due respect to Phil and his team and that wonderful video, we could have a video for every single monitoring report, and there would be wonderful narratives, but we wouldn't necessarily know to what extent our kids were succeeding, not succeeding, their needs were being met, their needs were being met by different groups of our population. So KPIs are helpful and really essential in providing an objective source of information. Secondly, and I think importantly and relevant to prior discussions, KPIs give the district kind of they're like the lines painted on the baseball field or the football field, in that they give the district an idea of what we as a board value and care about and what they should be focusing on and working towards. Is that fair, Dr. Ahart?
Yeah, I would also add that historically, really until last year, the staff would create monitoring reports as required by board governance policy. And what routinely seemed to happen from my view before I was superintendent was that a report would be shared, and then there would be lots of discussion about, well, I wish this data would have been included. I wish this data would have been included. And so staff would attempt to respond the next time that monitoring report came around, and then another set of data would be requested. And not only was that frustrating for the staff, but it really weakened the board's position in terms of being able to monitor the health and vitality of the organization as a whole over time. Because if you keep changing the indicators, we felt like we had moving targets. And also, I don't think the board had a real, as sound an understanding as they will have now about what is the health of the organization, where are we progressing, where do we need to accelerate growth, where are we falling behind. So the board spent considerable time last summer and then committed to KPIs for all of the monitoring reports, which was a tall task, with the exception of this one that Matt just shared, and then the 4.1.3 report that you'll receive in February. And obviously from the discussion tonight, it's difficult to know what are the best ways to monitor the health of the organization and progress of students in some of these really conceptual sort of ideas that typically aren't measured, and for good reason. There aren't good hardcore measures. So understandably, there hasn't been a commitment to what those are. So this was our first stab, as I think, and I can't remember exactly how Terry framed it, but now we have something to sort of, you know, what works in this report, what doesn't, what do you feel is missing information, what can we do a better job with? But I think it's really important, there's two really important things I want to lift up here. Number one, the board has not given up on what the community told the board years ago, what they expected from our schools in terms of the graduate ends. The board has revisited that. Was it 3 or 4 years ago now? I lose track. 3 or 4 years ago. Reconfirmed, made some tweaks, reworded them so they're more meaningful to the average Joe. They're not in boardese. You know, the student expectations, I think, are pretty easy to understand. They're much more measurable now as a whole, with these two exceptions. Still really difficult. It's much stronger language, I think, in terms of being meaningful to the community, to our students and our staff, than the wording in the old graduate ends. However, it still doesn't direct you in terms of, obviously, we'll measure this, 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 and this, and we'll be able to tell if our students are autonomous thinkers and creative problem solvers. Very difficult to measure. But I do salute the board that they've not eased up on that. Let's continue to work at this and figure out how we will measure the strength of our system and developing that in our students. So there aren't easy answers to this. We're one of the few districts, at least in the state, that's attempting to measure this. And it is important that we do, hopefully sooner rather than later, land on some KPIs that we feel comfortable with, at least for a period of time. You know, those can always be changed when the board sees fit, but the real power in them, as Rob indicated, is to be able to, first of all, kind of help set the course for my work and my team's work, but also to lay the table for the board to be able to, in a meaningful way, assess how well we're doing in those areas. And if we don't define some and commit to them, at least for some time, you're really shooting in the dark. So
long answer.
Sorry.
So then my follow-up question is, are we not mandated to have KPIs to vote for every report? Because that was also my understanding. Like, it was based on our KPIs that we were making decisions. So we're not bound to do that.
No, we are not.
This is just an initiative that, as a board, we've decided to create to hold ourselves accountable, but if we don't have a KPI, then we can still vote in good conscience if we don't have our measure.
Yes. In fact, I believe we have voted on monitoring reports without KPIs. Not this current construction of the board, but past boards have. And
Until this year.
Terry hits on the point. We didn't have KPIs until about 8 months ago. So just about most board monitoring reports lacked KPIs and were voted on. So, yes.
Okay.
I would bring
Ms.
up,
Bozen?
to me, KPIs added clarity for both administrative and board. So that's why you don't want a lot of them. You want to make them concise. And that doesn't mean they can't add more information or whatever. But at least let's hit on, these are the things that we're really going to be able to monitor and that they can monitor. So it was a method of consistency. As Dr. Ahart said, we would go back and forth, and every time and what you should be able to look at is one monitoring report to the next year, and see the trend. So it's not cut in stone that you have to have a KPI on everything. It's more an indicator of what is happening in their district. And the fact that we're even talking about it is a huge thing, I believe, because most school boards do not talk. They want all the assessment scores, and they want this score, and they want that score. This is showing that we want these things. We value what our community has said, and different interpretations the kids speaking, I think, says in this kind of report almost everything. So don't know if that helps clarify any at all.
Deanna?
Only to say, not to say that video wasn't super exciting and invigorating and all of those good things, but to use a video with most likely student leaders, a small sample necessarily isn't a good indicator of the district, right? And so I'm just saying that moving forward to have some sort of measure in place is necessary because it made us all feel good, and that was awesome. I'm not discrediting the fact that those students were genuine and authentic and that work isn't happening in our schools. I'm a East High grad, and I was so excited to see so many East High school students represented in that video, but I don't necessarily think it's a great indicator or reliable indicator of how our students are feeling across the entire district. A video of less than 20 students.
No, and then I think that's a fair point, but also fair to add that we got data that reported on 16,000 students. Correct.
The Gallup being a different measure.
And that was the focus of this report was that data. So, Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I just think Connie's right. I think that when she said about having the KPIs, it probably provided that clarity that you needed. And I think we either have to have them or not have them or have some kind of communication earlier rather than later, rather than like last minute, or especially for new board members who don't have the clarity and might need a little bit more time figuring out, okay, so this doesn't have a KPI, so how do we measure it, or what are we doing here? Because I've been told since I've been on the board, which has not been very long, there are KPIs and you need to be following the KPIs, and so I'm a little confused, but could be because I'm new as well. Thanks.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
So I don't want to belabor this issue, but I think there are a couple of things sort of in play. One is this notion of KPIs, where they exist, where they don't exist, and how we allow that process to evolve. So I think we have to set aside time to really be focused on that and to figure out how we use tonight's report and others where maybe we don't have KPIs, or maybe where we have some gaps in the existing KPIs to really strengthen that process. So I think we should make a pact with ourselves that we're going to spend time doing that. And then secondly, I do think when I go back to this particular monitoring report, you know, when I think about the notion of KPIs, you know, it should be an exact science, but when you begin to think about things that are so abstract as the things that we're identifying here, maybe it isn't quite that exact. And maybe what we need to do is if we decide that the Gallup student poll data, hope, engagement,
Entrepreneurial,
aspirations.
Yeah, that's a new one this year. Yeah.
Are those the three things?
They are now.
Okay. So if we decide that those three are really sort of the strongest indicators that we have available to us now, to inform this particular component of our monitoring report, you know, maybe we decide that the index data that we get from year to year is what we use to gauge whether or not we're making progress and whether or not we have enough information upon which to either support or not support the monitoring report. So, you know, again, I think this area is just so abstract that trying to come up with something that is so definitive and so specific and so definable and so measurable is a little challenging. And I think we have to recognize that. That doesn't exist for our other monitoring reports the way it exists here. So I think that's something that we really have to wrestle with, and I would challenge us to really have that conversation. But again, we're light years ahead of where we were, so.
Ms. Langford.
Final comment. Recognizing, and even that communication in the sense of, I mean, literally coming to this conversation not knowing that KPIs weren't a mandated thing that we needed to have to be able to vote on a report. I think shows where we might need to go back and do some board development as a board about our processes a little bit, because I didn't know that, right? And so I think that moving forward, recognizing that I can vote on this now without that, because I do think the data presented was good. However, I also think we had a point earlier where it may be a false positive, not knowing really when you break down that data, what our students by subgroup may be feeling. But with the information that we have available to us today, I understand that I can now vote on this report because it is what it is. So, thank you.
Well, Ms. Anderson, did you want to speak? Okay.
Yeah, we
We do have a motion in a second. I will just add for the record that I do believe that the information provided was full and comprehensive in answering the questions that we've laid out per this monitoring report. So I will definitely be voting to approve it, and we'll at that point call for the vote. Motion passes 5-2. Thank you. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is an information item, F2, Special Education Update. I will give a moment for our presenter to come forward.
You ever cast 1,000? Oh, do you have someone else come up?
Take it away,
Okay,
Ms.
good
Boswich.
evening. We're happy to be here this evening. Angie Constable joins me up here. Angie is the Special Education Supervisor for Early Access and Early Childhood. And I should have started by saying I am Shelley Bosovich, Executive Director of Student and Family Services. When we talk with you tonight about special education services, I hope that you can see the mission of the district alive and well in the services that we provide. You've heard a lot about special education as a subgroup, and in fact, in many of the monitoring reports, special education is discussed as a subgroup and data is presented. Tonight, what we would really like to do is talk with you about the services that we provide. We would like to highlight some of the teachers and students who provide those services and give you a description of the Council of Great City Schools review, talk with you about their findings, our goals, and then offer you an opportunity for questions. At the end of the presentation, we're hoping that you have a level of knowledge of the services that we provide and an understanding of the council's format and their report, as well as an awareness of the goals that we have moving forward. Overview of our program. You know that we are unique in size, for sure. Everyone is well aware of that in the district, that we are larger than any other district in the state, but we are also unique in terms of function within the special education department. Every district provides their own instructional services, but in Iowa, we are the only district that provides the support services as well, which means we provide all of the supports for identification, our services for early access as well. So our youngest students are just weeks old and are served in the home, and our oldest students are served through the age of 21 and largely served in our community. Most of the services that we provide are provided in the comprehensive schools, although we do have two special schools, Ruby Van Meter and Smouse, and then some special programs. You've heard some about Jesse Franklin Taylor and the Focus program. We also have a residential facility within our district boundary, and that is Orchard Place. We are responsible for providing the educational services to any students who are on campus there. And the hospital programs within our boundaries, we also provide the educational services. So we have 2 teachers at Lutheran, 1 at Blank, and 1 at Mercy. Special education identification. Child find responsibilities. Again, in Des Moines, it is unique that we provide our own services and we're responsible for child find activities. That literally means finding students with a disability who require special education services. You can see the number of students who are identified over time. This last year, 647 students were identified as needing special education services within the district. Special education enrollment. Last year we served, or excuse me, as of the count in October of this year, 5,288 students. It looks like there's a blip there and we've had some trending up, but if we look at the data over the last 10 years, the trend is actually down. We are currently serving about 15% of our students in special education at this point, and about 10 years ago, the percentage was 19. When we look at enrollment by race, we pull out and we see that we are comparable in most areas in terms of the amount of the percentage of students served in each race in the district and in special education, with the exception of African American. Our state requires that we meet performance indicators, a state performance plan, and there are 20 indicators. We're thankful that most of those indicators are the right indicators. By our state indicator, we have 2 indicators that talk about disproportionality. We are not considered disproportionate in terms of the state indicator. However, this is a problem for us, and so that's why we were digging a little bit deeper in this data and wanted to try to understand this. We do find that the issue is in elementary, and it is around students with behavior goals. This is data that we shared with the Council of Great City Schools when they came in for their review, and we asked them for some specific feedback and suggestions for improvement around this area. Some of those things we are implementing and have implemented right away. One of those is to provide consultation around behavior, and we're doing that right away. We're doing that now, in fact, every Wednesday. And then the second thing was sharing the responsibility for serving students with challenging behavior with our general education partners. As of today, we started training with 9 behavior strategists who serve the elementary schools. Those 9 behavior strategists will now be responsible for providing training around de-escalation strategies as outlined by crisis prevention and intervention for all elementary staff. So we're excited about that. Exit data. It's a widely held belief that once a student is staffed into special education, that they are there for the rest of their school career. Unfortunately, there is some evidence to support that. Nationally, students exit from special ed and return to the general education classroom at the rate of about 4%. We are slightly better than that in Des Moines, but not much. So that continues to be a goal for us, to return students to the general education environment. So I talked a little bit about the support and related services. The related services that we provide are provided through funds that flow through the AEA. So we have a contract with Heartland AEA, and the money comes through and we provide our own consultants, psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech and language pathologists, all of those people to provide those support and related services. Also under that contract, we provide early access service. That would be for the students from birth to age 3. Again, we are the only district in the state that provides those services to their families. If we look at the support staff that I just talked with you about, where we have them from the contract with the AEA, we can kind of group them into different areas of support. So you can see instructional support, behavior and mental health support, assessment and intervention, language development, and access to the curriculum. Within each of those columns, there are people that it is their job to perform those tasks. So the consultants and the support teachers, it is a part of their job description and expectation that they provide instructional support to teachers in the classroom. It's not to say that there can't be some overlap. For example, a school psychologist, while they're in the column of assessment and intervention, they can also provide some behavior and mental health support as well. So early access and early childhood, I talked with you a little bit to say that, you know, we've served those infants and toddlers, unlike any other district in the state. That is a part of IDEA Part C. So the students who are served are students who have a 25% delay or are born, with a known cause of something that would put them at risk. And those things can be a medical diagnosis, it can be being premature. We have a great group of people that are serving our youngest students. And so I wanted to highlight a little bit of their service by showing you what they do.
I feel like this approach of coaching within families, daily routines, says you really are the most important person in your child's life, and we're going to demonstrate that by making sure the visit is about you and your child and not about me and my checklist. I feel like I am respecting the differences in families and for their priorities. I feel like I'm trying to do a much better job of listening to them, asking them questions about what do they want, what do they need, and what part of their day is maybe not going as well as they'd like. The most important relationship here is the parent and child, and we are coaches to give support and some ideas of things that they could add on to what they've already been doing really well. I think one example of using direct teaching today was when Chris said she really loves to go for walks now. So one of the things that happened on the walk today is that Chris was telling me they have a routine of going down the block and then coming back. But when we were about halfway, Kaya wanted to stop and get down from her walker and feel a different surface that she was not used to. And so I pointed out to Chris that was a really good opportunity to just go with it and use that time to talk about what she's feeling and to let her kind of lead the activity and see what she shows curiosity in.
They give you so many ideas, things that you take for granted, how to incorporate learning opportunity to her routine every single day. For instance, when you go on a walk, there's opportunity to do your signing out there too. So when you see a dog walking by, you say, Kaya, dog? Is that a dog? You know, or when you see the cat, you're like, is that a cat? Cat, you know, make it fun and stuff like that.
I think that was a good prompt though, Chris, when you were saying, you know, you see she's upset and then you say, what do you want? Because obviously the crying is a form of communication where she's trying to let you know, I don't want this, and even if she doesn't know what she wants, you're giving her options. Yeah. Do you want this? Do you want the walker? Do you want the iPad? So she needs to learn how to make a choice. So that was really good.
So when they're suggesting something, they're suggesting it to be like, oh, you're doing this wrong, blah, blah, blah. No, they're suggesting, well, no, you're doing good in that. Now let's just add on to that.
I wanted to show you that video because that is a service that you may not be aware that we are providing. And I also wanted to show it to you because that is one of a series of videos that's being used across the country, actually, to train teachers in how to implement this model. So our early access program has been known as national leaders in the area of early access, and we're really proud of that and very happy for the service that they provide to our families. Early access referrals. They're also a very busy group. You can see that last year they had 630 referrals for services. Those referrals come from a variety of places. They come from the parents themselves, they come from the hospital, doctor's offices, DHS, Department of Health, a variety of sources. Some of those students who are found to be in need of an IEP go on to receive services in early childhood special education. You can see that the majority of them, however, do not go on to early childhood. You saw 630 there, and last year in early childhood special education, we served 241 students. We have 19 classrooms in the district. 15 of those are in our early childhood center. 1 is at Capitol View and 3 are at Smouse. So K-12 special education, a continuum of services. We do provide the continuum of services in our comprehensive schools, and we're very proud that we're able to do that. That is something that not all districts, in fact, many other districts are not able to do. And because they can't provide the continuum of services, they contract with either other service providers or other districts to provide those services for them. We program to meet the needs of individual students, whether it's a high incidence or low incident disability, high incident being a disability that we see frequently, such as a disability in the area of reading, or a low incidence disability such as the deaf or blindness. The majority of our students are served in their neighborhood schools. There are some students who are served in cluster programs because of either the need for specialization, the resources, those kinds of things. An example of that would be our deaf education program. So we cluster the students served in that program at Capitol View, Hyatt, and East. That's not to say that all students who need those services are at Capitol View, Hyatt, and East, but we do have an option for students in that cluster. We also have, like I said, the 2 special schools, Ruby Van Meter and Smouse, and we provide support and related services at each of these places. So the point of that being that we can address individual student needs. So virtually any student we can serve in Des Moines, and that means that we can add support and related service in any of these, in the neighborhood school, in a cluster, in a special school, or whatever the case may be. Every student who is found eligible for special education services has an individualized education plan. That plan is made up of goals, and those goals are related to the areas in which they need our help. So the IEP is written, the goals are written every year, and the goals are monitored for most goal areas every week, in some cases every other week. Teachers do a great job of setting goals with their students as well. I wanted to show you just this little clip here. We have of a teacher who is setting a goal with her student at Edmonds.
So when you took the SRI in August, right, your score was 444. Okay, that's a good score. Okay. So now we're going to take it again here in the winter. Okay, what do you want your goal? If you were at 444 in August, what do you want your goal to be to get to this time? What do you think? So if we were out here at 444, want to go for 500? 550? Okay. So that's going to be your goal. Okay, so what are you going to do when you take this SRI to help you get your goal? What are you going to focus on?
Reading the questions carefully.
Reading the questions carefully? Okay. So when you're done, we'll conference and we'll look at how much growth you need, okay?
Stephanie was here in the audience, and I saw that she had to scoot out. She, along with several of our other teachers, have come tonight to offer support and to say that they would answer any questions that people would have as well. This video, I realize, is not the best quality, but I wanted to talk with you a little bit about how those videos come to be. We have support teachers, I mentioned in an earlier slide, and they go out and they work with teachers. They model for them, or they provide coaching, those kinds of things. And so one of the things that they do fairly frequently is they will do videotaping, either of themselves or of the teacher, and they use that as a model so that they can teacher can self-reflect, and they also use it for coaching. I don't know what the support teacher talked with Stephanie about after viewing this video, but one of the things that really struck me was the relationship that she clearly had with that student. I don't know if you caught that, but you know, he was holding her hand as they were going through and talking about that. That is certainly a very strong piece of the program that we put forth, and that is the relationship between students and their teachers. Transition services. I mentioned the state performance plan, and 2 of those 20 indicators are around transition. So we are required to start transition services at age 14. Some of our teachers get very creative in how they start having students explore their interests and the possible career choices they may make for the future. I have another video for you. Again, I told you I wanted to showcase our teachers. They are great, and our students are wonderful. This is a teacher at Merrill who brought in academic skills and social skills to start kind of a mini cottage industry to help students kind of start exploring their interest and to feel what it feels like to be a worker.
Opening December 4th. We are open every Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. At Merrill School, room 116. Each drink is $2. Come and get some drink. I want to get some coffee. You got wood and wood and coffee time. Not.
Who's here?
Who?
Who?
What's so funny about it? Just a joke. It's the best coffee shop in town.
Liz Greer, the teacher at Merrill, is with us this evening. She shared with me that the students put that to video together themselves, and I was asking her a little bit about the program and that sort of thing, and she said, I don't know. The last student that you saw there, he brought the program in, and so he was really teaching them how to put this commercial together. So if you have time on a Friday morning, I'm sure Liz would welcome you. I can personally tell you that the chai tea is delicious, so I would recommend that. So the transition services we provide go all the way through high school. And at each one of our high schools, we have a transition coordinator on staff. That person helps students develop their interests and puts them in positions where they can get some job training, either in the school or out in the community. There are times that students need to stay longer than the 4 years of high school, and we certainly have that as a case in all of our comprehensive high schools. We have seen over time that there are students who need additional and more intensive work on vocational skills. So we've developed 2 programs in Des Moines for that purpose. One is the STEP program, Secondary Transition Employment Program, and Project Search. So the STEP program serves students in the community. Kristen McCullough, who is our transition coordinator for the district, has developed over 84 sites in the community based on the students' interest. And I think it's very important to note that those sites were based on student interest. She's done a great job of making sure teaching our teachers how to get a good idea on what kinds of things people may be more interested in and where they would like to have their life go after high school. We do have a classroom component. It's right around the corner here at Central Campus. And I'm sure they would be happy to have you stop in anytime, but don't be surprised if you don't find them there. They're typically in the community. So if we look at our data, the first graduating class through STEP was in 2013. We actually started the STEP program through funds from ARA. And so we were able to purchase some equipment and that kind of thing, and actually Senator Harkin's office was very helpful in that, so we appreciated that a lot. You notice that our data has gotten better over time. We think that we're getting better at serving our students. If you look at the national averages for employment of students with disabilities, you'll find studies anywhere from 30 to 50% that they are employed at 30% rather than what you're seeing here. We do know that the more likely they are to be employed after high school, they are more likely to be employed after high school, if we offer them those services and those opportunities to explore careers while we have them. Another program that we have is Project Search. This program is a joint effort with Mercy Hospital, Easter Seals, and Vocational Rehabilitation. All of the positions are at Mercy Hospital, and there are 24 sites there within the hospital where they've developed internships. Mercy has been a phenomenal partner with us. They have totally embraced our program and our students. So they've gotten training on how to be a mentor to our students, and I can tell you it has made a huge difference in the life of many of our kids. I want to share with you another video clip, if you don't mind, one of the students who has gone through the Project Search program.
My first internship was maintenance, and that basically taught me how to work with more advanced power tools, how to use a box cutter properly, and really showed me how to work together with multiple different people in a smaller area. Right now at Workless Industries, I basically sweep the areas, pick up trash, and collect cardboard and then compact it. Sometimes I have to cut the bigger cardboard boxes. I have to cut up with the box cutter, and the smaller ones I can just fold up and throw in the compactor. I'm hoping to one day help with the assembly around the factory.
The team of folks here at World Class has done a terrific job of accepting Ryan and all of his contributions. They've enjoyed having Ryan around. They understand that what we're trying to do for Ryan is find and nurture his abilities.
One of them, the dockman Hugh, he's really friendly. One of my bosses, Chad, he's also really nice. As I was jokingly told, without me, this place would just become completely dirty.
Prior to Ryan coming to World Class, he was well prepared and well trained in daily duties and responsibilities. I think he came to us with the disciplines necessary to move into an industrial environment, which was the caution we exhibit daily with the safety. Ryan clearly understands the necessary components of being in a safe environment and does a great job of watching because we have moving vehicles within the facility. We have very heavy items, and he's learned to work around those and protect himself at all times.
I want you to notice that Ryan's supervisor talked about him coming to them prepared and ready. When Ryan was in his 4th year of high school and ready to graduate, he'd completed all of his high school graduation requirements, but he was not ready to go into the world of work. So he entered our program, and we spent some more time with Ryan. In fact, Ryan stayed 3 more years. Ryan is now working full-time at Lowe's. So when he graduated, he did work for the company that you were just seeing, but he continued to grow. The data that you see here is for Project Search in terms of the percentage of students employed upon graduating from the program. You can see that the percentages are really pretty good. At the bottom, where it talks about average hourly wage and average hourly hours per week, that is actually outdated data. because what is happening for our students is very much like Ryan. When they graduate from school, they are working, this is the average, but they continue to grow and go further in their job skills. So you can see, and I hope you see, that we have lots of great things going on in Des Moines for our students with disabilities. We certainly want to continue to grow, and in that spirit, we invited the Council of the Great City Schools to come in and do a program review for us. Many of you, or at least some of you, last year may have been interviewed when they came. Their process was to ask us for some data, and it was pretty extensive data. They were here at the end of January, and at the beginning of January, they asked us for lots of student data. I think there were 36 points, but don't be fooled by that because some of those points were A through H and that kind of thing. So they looked deeply at everything. They were on site for 3 days. They did interviews, like I said, with some board members, school and central office staff, both teachers and administrators, parents and community members. They provided us an on-site debriefing as they were walking out the door and the final report in June. As they were walking out the door, I think I took 8 pages of notes that day, and we started implementing some of their suggestions probably the next day. So the report was very comprehensive, as you know, and it's in your supporting documents, 150 pages with many, many details. It provided an insight and perspective that we never could have gotten any other way. Certainly not by having a program review from within the district, nor from having a program review from anyone in the state of Iowa. I'm so appreciative of that and the perspective that they were able to provide us. They're also providing ongoing support from the team members. It's great that I have them to talk with now and just run things by them and that sort of thing. So I told you they had many, many details, but there were some major themes where many of those details could be sort of clustered. Those 3 themes were multi-tiered system of support, collaboration, and compliance versus instruction. The overall theme of multi-tiered system of support, they talked about the passion that they saw for implementing a multi-tiered system of support, but they also talked about not seeing the vision and the systemic frame for implementing that across the district. So we are working on the recommendations related to that, and I know there was a board work session, and they shared some of that with you. They talked about the district leadership team and that we have all voices at the table representing each group. I'm a member of that, ELL, Gifted, Office of Schools, Office of Innovation. So we developed a handbook last year, and we're still making some revisions to that as we're looking at the benchmarks and the things that we're able to provide schools in implementing a multi-tiered system of support. There's ongoing professional development, and it's emphasized at every leadership PLC, which is once a month on a Wednesday. And we are talking about, we have brought in a national expert, as the council recommended. Judy Elliott has worked with us, and we will likely be bringing her in to work with the leadership PLC. The second overall theme was collaboration. They talked about seeing that there wasn't collaboration at high levels in the district, and part of the issue of that they felt was related to the structure of the program. So right away, we reorganized student and family services so that we could align with the district networks. Special education staff now meet frequently with their network partners. In fact, there is a special education staff member on every network team. We meet weekly with the Office of Schools, Office of Academics, and collaborate around our big work, multi-tiered system of support, SRG, instructional framework, and cultural proficiency. Some of our school staff have commented on how much they appreciate having the network teams for support and how it offers a perspective to them that they didn't have otherwise. Going on with the collaboration, special education staff members are now embedded in some other departments. For example, we added a data analyst who is now a part of the district's assessment team. His job is to make sure that we have the voice of students with disabilities at the table, and that if there are data points that are being gathered for any department or any students within the district, that students with disabilities also have information gathered in that same manner. The special education supervisors and other leaders also participate in the District Leadership PLC. That is new. And again, we're hearing from our school partners how much they appreciate that. The third and final overall theme was compliance versus instruction. And what we found was that in an effort to help our teachers, we took on responsibility for some things that we probably shouldn't have. I'll take out the probably, that we shouldn't have. And because of that, what we did instead of helping them was we didn't provide them the instructional support that they so desperately needed. All of our time was spent on compliance issues specifically related to the IEP. And while that is very important, really it is the job of the teacher. So we took a look at the roles and responsibilities related to compliance and instruction. We collaborated with our partners in the Office of Schools, and we reworked some of those responsibilities. Now, at the school level, there is more of an ownership of students with disabilities and IEPs. So the principals are being informed when they see issues related to IEPs. This has allowed them to see some themes in the buildings and some needs of their students that possibly they would not have recognized otherwise. We also hold open labs for teachers. While we were providing a lot of support around the compliance issues, IEPs to be specific, we didn't want to drop that kind of support to them. So instead of providing that in their classrooms during the school day or after school or whatever, we provide open labs. So every week there's a lab available for any special education teacher at Walker. Consultants now spend more time on instructional support for special education teachers. That's not to say that they don't have work around the IEP, but now the work around the IEP is really about guiding instruction and looking at progress monitoring and making sure that the instruction is really conferring the kind of benefit to students that it should. We have twice monthly professional development for our consultants around the areas of curriculum and instruction so that they can keep up on those skills and be better support and service to the teachers. Once a month, every consultant meets with their teachers and they review student data, looking specifically at instructional strategies and the kind of impact that those strategies had on student achievement. There were certainly some celebrations that the council brought to our attention as they were leaving and when they wrote the report. I won't go through all of these. I will just share that we were quite pleased that one of those celebrations was in the area of parent engagement. They talked with us when they were leaving, and they said that they had never had the kind of experience that they had in Des Moines when they talked with parents and the advocacy groups. They talked about how positive parents are about the services that they receive. They also talked about some of the indicators of that positivity, and that's the relatively low number of state complaints, due process proceedings, that sort of thing that we have in the area of special education. That is something we are very proud of. We want to make sure that we are serving our students and our families well, and the fact that they voiced that made us very happy. Any questions you have for us?
If I may weigh in real quickly, I want to salute Shelley and her entire team. When I talked to her about calling the council, that can understandably be a very intimidating thing. Shelley and her team operate, as she lightly touched on at the beginning of the presentation, differently than everywhere else in the state. And we have a unique context here, being a large urban district with a very diverse student population. And exacerbating that challenge in special education even more is the very large number of English language learners, and trying to figure out what's the what. Right. So the council, provided really some of the best experts in the country in special education, and specifically special education in environments that resemble our environment. And Shelley and her team really have very, very few opportunities to really have collegial conversations and problem-solving workshops with folks who are familiar with our setting. So I just want to congratulate Shelley and her entire team for welcoming in with open arms the expertise that we received from the council. Many things were implemented immediately. Shelley and I actually spent considerable time one-on-one once we got the initial report, and then it was months later when we actually got the full report that you all have. So I was really proud of the team. An easy thing to say no to. Absolutely the right thing to do for kids, and there were absolutely a lot of celebrations, and I also want to mention that some of the things that were some of our biggest barriers were things that the council actually approached our State Department of Education with. Some of the things some of the information that we shared with them, they didn't necessarily believe, and we said, no, we are forced to do this. So they actually helped leverage some positive change at the state level as well. So it was a very good partnership, and I'm glad that the relationship is continuing.
Before we move to board comment, I do want to raise up the work that you do on employment readiness, because I think it's tremendously important. I've seen the same statistics that you have. I'm very familiar with, and I think accurate data saying that 70% of people with disabilities lack gainful employment. And in this country, that's a tragedy. And I think the worst part about it is I think the average person would probably expect a number like that and would expect less. And I think societally we're moving away from that, and I think your work is evidence of that. Because these are obviously students that can work full time when they leave our environs, and they need our help and assistance to get them there. It's some of the most important work that you all do, and that we're fortunate to be a part of. So I'm very I enjoyed watching that video and seeing a success story, but even more so, I appreciate that you're keeping data on hourly wage, hours worked, and that it is it's above minimum wage, which wasn't that long ago where in the state there was sub-minimum wage employment was a lot more common for people with disabilities, and to see our students earning almost $10 an hour is fantastic. So I'll open it to comment and question, but thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone from the board?
No, this has been great information. To add to what Rob said, Project Search, I've visited the program. I've seen some of the kids working in the gift shop, in the kitchen, all over the place. It is fantastic, and I love that we do that and that we're part of that. And appreciate the efforts that you all have made, and I can see where Tom said it would be a daunting thing, but it was the right thing to do, and thank you all for the work you do.
Okay.
Ms. Anderson?
I just have a question. When it was talking about the IEP and I like that the focus is on supporting the instruction and less on, the IEP, the work of the IEP.
Yes.
That's one thing I always hear from special ed teachers, just in general, like how much work those IEPs are and how much time they take. And then you mentioned the weekly labs. How does that work? I mean, do they have extra time to go to those weekly? I don't know what that
So
would
on
look
the
like.
Wednesday early outs, there are some days that are teacher directed. And so a teacher could opt to come on that Wednesday. And our principals have also been open to allowing a teacher to come in a time that maybe they have some things going on in the building, where on, again, a Wednesday afternoon, that it wouldn't be detrimental to the teacher to miss. It would be more important for them to come and get some support around IEPs.
Okay, yeah, because I just know, seems like it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, but then it's nice that you're supporting the instruction. It just, I just always remember my friends just seem to have a desk load of paperwork, much more than my desk load of paperwork, I guess. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ms. Langford?
Hi, I just wanted to ask a clarification question. At the beginning, when we were talking about first, there was no column for Latino students. Was that just because you said nobody really had the high disparities like our African American students?
Let me look at my chart here. I think that was an oversight on my part. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I really
That information to you.
No, yeah. I was just curious. And then I just wanted to know, particularly around, did you say that the Council of Great City Schools identified that a lot of the issues with the disparity in African American students was happening on the elementary level, and it was particularly around behavior? So essentially, African American students maybe were acting out in class, and then they were being identified as SPED students.
Yeah, that's right. And this is another conversation that Dr. Ahart and I have had over time as well. I'm really anxious to get the multi-tiered system of support in place in the district, because we do have students who struggle with challenging behavior, and they do need extra support, but it doesn't have to come from special education. So, I'm anxious to see that happening. I see that actually on its way. Like I said, with some of the training that we started even today. It's a 4-day training, and they started today to get training around de-escalation and that kind of thing.
That's exciting. That was really exciting to hear.
Yeah.
And then, could you walk me through the IEP process and what that looks like, what that entails? I hear that word thrown around a lot in my work as well, but I don't necessarily know. I know it's a plan, but who's involved in that process? And then, who's involved in that process, and what does it look like? What's the purpose of it?
Angie, do you want to talk about that?
The IEP process really is a team, and the team includes the parent, the special ed teacher, the gen ed teacher, the student as they get older. So everyone who has contact with that student is part of that team, developing goals for that student in areas that they're eligible. So it could be reading, math, writing, behavior, whatever areas they need support. So setting those goals for a year, and the teacher then monitors specifically based on that goal and does frequent progress monitoring to look at the student's progress. And if the student isn't making the kind of progress we would expect, then they can make some instructional changes based on that. So that's why it's that frequent progress monitoring, not just Iowa test of basic skills, or that's an old term. And so they look at that progress. We also look at what other supports do students need to be successful. So it might be accommodations that the student needs in order for them to have access to the curriculum and to participate in that gen ed environment as much as possible. So that development of the IEP is through a team process, and it's reviewed at least once a year. It certainly can be reviewed more frequently. And parents get those updated progress reports on how their student is doing frequently throughout the year.
Thank you. For our students who are non-English speakers, is there are there supports in place for the parents then to understand that process as well?
We work with interpreters through the building so that we can have interpreters there. We try our best to have things in their native language. Depending upon the language, that's not always possible, but we always have interpreters there to translate what's going on and try to make that more friendly to them, because it's a difficult process for everyone. It's more difficult if you're not a native English speaker.
Thank you.
Further comment, question? Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Shelley.
Your team.
Thanks.
There's no action on that item. Our next item on our agenda is item F3, attendance area revision for Harding, Goodwill, and Hoyt Middle Schools. There's no action on this item, but we do have a presentation, and I will turn the festivities over to the esteemed Tim Schott.
Thank you. Thank you, Board. Good evening. I thought I'd stand to give you a little different perspective. Hopefully that's helpful. You have this information in your packet, but I'm happy to share this proposed revision of attendance areas for 3 of our middle schools. And now I just need to there we go. Okay. Why are we even doing this? I need to make sure everyone's on the same page about why we're engaging in this process. The first focus and reason is because we need to expand the Goodwill attendance area. We need to do that for a number of reasons. One is because this board asked us to a few years back as we were reviewing attendance areas for middle schools and high schools, and at that time Goodwill had no attendance area at all. And so that's one reason. The second reason, which is near and dear to my heart, is related to equity. And that is Goodwill was the only school that did not have an attendance area. And because it was entirely within district transfer fed and enrolled, that meant that some students that actually lived very close to Goodwill were unable to attend it and literally had to drive right past or get bused, in some cases, right past to attend another school. So approaching all of our enrollment at the middle school from the equitable lens of if you live close to that school, you should be able to attend that school was also a reason to expand the attendance area. But there were a couple other reasons. The one is the Goodwill community also asked for their attendance area to be expanded from the smaller version that applied to this year to the proposed version that will apply next year and moving forward. And then the second big why is that we are constantly trying to utilize our facilities well, to neither overstress or underuse our buildings. And so we need to constantly monitor the enrollment trends and patterns in our neighborhoods. And again, the board actually asked us to do that a couple of years ago on a more frequent basis than the 25-year cycle that we had engaged in prior to about 4 years ago. The scope of this particular project was actually quite narrow. We were an ad hoc to the Facilities Advisory Committee. Given that distinction by Bill Good and his team, because it was just a small section of the city, 3 schools, they allowed us to work in an ad hoc fashion. We were not engaged in looking at the east or the north attendance areas or any of the other middle schools. We had a very, very narrow scope. We also had a robust committee. Part of the approach here was to have active parents representing the schools that would be impacted. And these folks attended every meeting, and we had a great time. One of our norms was speak your truth, and we did a lot of that in these meetings. And those folks, as you'll hear in a minute, were very active all the way through the community meetings. The last one of which was last night. There are a couple of specific elements to this plan, and they're actually all very simple and straightforward. The one is how are we going to transition students, and it's simply an incoming 6th grade process. So the proposal would apply to students that are currently 5th graders that are going to enter those schools next year, and then it rolls up to the 6th graders the following year and the 6th graders the year after that, so that it takes 3 years essentially for the attendance area to become realized, if you will. Then there's this notion of grandfathering, and that's the question of students that are currently in the school, what happens to them? And this is also very straightforward, and that is, it's mirrored with the rolling up of 6th grade, and that is the students currently in the school finish in that school in every case, in all 3 middle schools is the proposal. Then you've looked at some maps, I'm certain. This is the current middle school map, and if you look up in the northeast corner there, I believe the color is green. That is, I'm seeing some head nodding, thank you, Natasha. That is the current Goodroll attendance area. Then to its south and east is Hoyt, and to the west of the Goodroll attendance area is Harding currently. And then compare and contrast. And again, just to put context, that green section that's Goodroll right now is actually new for the current 6th graders. So it's only a year old. And we worked on it 2 or 3 years ago, and some of you helped with that. Then the proposed map shows that exact same area. And if you'll notice, what's happened here exactly is the Goodroll attendance area has expanded both directions. It's expanded towards Harding to East 14th, and it's expanded towards Hoyt, down south of Hubble Avenue. So that whole section there south of Hubble Avenue is the Hoyt expansion area, so both directions. Then to enrollment projections. Obviously, utilizing our facilities well is one key piece of this proposal and future looks at attendance areas. So the current enrollment for all 3 of those middle schools is listed there on the left. And then the projection for next school year, which is actually very accurate. We use it for staffing purposes, in fact, this time of year, is in the middle column. And then the 17-18 is our projection based on the demographic study that was done for the district about 6 years or so ago, but also what we know about current students living in that area that are 2nd graders and 3rd graders and 4th graders, and rolling those students up into their schools eventually. In addition to the within district transfer trends for those schools in and out, and the sibling relationship that they have at those various schools as well. So let me talk a bit more about that, because a question came up at both community forums actually, and it's a good question, and that is, what should those schools be at in terms of enrollment? And by chance, it's actually listed in order. The desired enrollment for Hoyt, based on capacity, is between 500 and 600. For Goodroll, it's between 600 and 700, and for Harding, it's between 700 and 800. And I should mention, 3 slides ago, that another reason to look at the attendance area in that part of the city was that the Harding attendance was actually growing rapidly, and we needed to shrink the Harding attendance area and do something about the attendance at Harding. Then there were a couple additional pieces which are actually not part of the board proposal, but it speaks to the benefit of engaging the community in a process, and that is these 2 thoughtful additions to procedure that we can engage in at the district level, at the staff level, really, not at the board level. But I wanted to tell you about them because I think they're a good illustration of what community involvement can produce for us. The first is this notion of siblings. We've had for years sort of a sticky situation for families, because a sibling in middle school only has 3 years in order to be a sibling, whereas in elementary school you have 6 years to be a sibling, and in high school you have 4 years. So a great addition and help really to our families who have relationships with a middle school in our city is to expand that notion of concurrent siblings, so that families can continue into a middle school that they have a relationship with. So that was a great byproduct. That's a procedural byproduct on our end. And then the second was, Goodroll as a within district transfer fed school wholly had no need for transportation, because part of within district transfer is that parents are responsible for transportation. And so as we're transitioning to a neighborhood school, another thoughtful addition was that the community said, you know, Tim, you really need to look at the transportation options in that part of the city, not just yellow bus routes, but also how DART is serving that part of the city, because we have some concerns. And so there are actually pockets of the northeast corridor there that are underserved. And so our team, our DART folks and our yellow folks are already working together on that question to try to improve transportation options for that part of our city. The communication plan, I'm not going to read through all of this, but families, 5th grade and middle school families were all contacted in a variety of ways and in a couple different languages. They were pointed to actually website information, the same website information you all were pointed to, and in every case they were also given me as the contact if they had any questions. We also held informational meetings at East and North, and in English and Spanish, had translation support at both those meetings. And then of course you know what's happening tonight, which is the information is coming to you, and it's on the schedule to be approved on the 2nd. And we're already queued up to contact families on the 3rd. Community feedback. I wanted to sort of summarize what those two meetings told us about this proposal. The first is I want to commend committee members who aren't here to be commended, but in addition to their tireless service to the project, many of them attended these meetings and were participated. They answered questions. They met with board members and with parents. So I really appreciate the work of that committee. But also, we had 4 board members who attended at least one of these sessions as well. And so I appreciate that. And you learned a great deal and gave me important feedback. Themes. The great news here is that probably because of working with the parent community representing those schools, this proposal received terrific support, fantastic support. In fact, we had a parent meeting in April at Goodrill where that was pretty high intensity, I guess I would say. Some of you were there, and one of the parents who was at one of these community meetings was also at the Goodrill meeting in April. And she came to me at the very end of one of these meetings, and she had tears in her eyes, and she was just being very thankful. She said, I want to thank you because all the things that I was worried about and all the things that we shared our concerns about that you said you would look into, that you would at least consider, you clearly have actually done that. You listened to us. And so that example warmed my heart, but also, again, is just a testimony to engaging the community, and that's a very smart and successful strategy. I also received some emails, but not a lot, between 6 to 10 emails, which resulted in answering all questions satisfactorily. And in that top section where I say all questions were answered, what I mean by that was there was no feedback or no question that posed a, ooh, yeah, didn't think about that, or ooh, we need to go back to the drawing board. And in fact, my most vocal board member, who was going to come tonight, except one of her child's events got canceled, I confirmed with her today this slide. I said, now, Beth, I'll just pull her out since she's not here. Beth, this is what I'm going to say about these community meetings. Do you agree with my assessment? She said, absolutely. It worked very well. Great support, and there was nothing that came from either of those meetings that causes pause or causes us to need to go back to the drawing board in any way. So that's it. Questions from you?
If I may, I would like to thank this board for agreeing to allow us to move forward with looking at the secondary attendance areas 4 years ago. It hadn't been done in 25 years. There's been dramatic changes in the city in 25 years, obviously, now almost 30 years. And our buildings are where our buildings are. I wish like crazy, especially our high schools, that I could physically move them. We can't. And so to make sure that we're not overstressing the staff and making unsafe and uncomfortable conditions for our students, but also to just be the best stewards that we can and set our staff up with the right conditions to provide the best education that we can for our families. It was really our responsibility to do that, and it's a very uncomfortable thing to do. When we did go through that with secondary 4 years ago and then elementary the next year, we did promise the board that we will review these every 2 years. So we'll be examining again elementaries next year. We don't anticipate many changes, but likely there will be a few tweaks here or there to ensure that we're keeping up with the demographic changes that continually happen in our city. But this is about as dramatic a change that I would anticipate in the next few years. And that was, as Tim said too, the other piece that we've done now is instead of having 5 or 6 choice schools in the district, all of our schools are schools of choice. All of them have a boundary, so if you live nearby a school in Des Moines, you can attend the nearby school in Des Moines without having to have any be on any special list or have any special secret information to be able to do that. So I think we are providing a much greater level of equity and continually engaging the community. We can continue to make smart adjustments that accommodate families' needs very, very well. And so thank you for your leadership on this, Tim.
Yeah.
Comment, question?
Go ahead.
Ms. Newcomb?
Sure. Thank you again, particularly for putting up with all my questions during this process as well. I got an opportunity to be at both the public meetings and did a fantastic job, and I love the outcome of the slides because you really did address a lot of those questions. I mean, personally, my son was impacted by the redistricting, and he would have been in Goodrow, but he's in Harding, and so we actually drive. I mean, it's a ways away,
Yeah,
so
quite a ways.
I could see this benefiting a lot of parents there, even the new district. So, I really appreciate it. The one thing that I did hear was the moving of the process afterwards going a little too fast. That was concerning, but otherwise, the actual maps themselves, overall, overwhelming support. So,
Thank you.
great job.
Thank you. Ms. Boson?
Well, this is not that I want this exact plan, but I think it's a great plan. I just felt that Goodrow needed a boundary, and that's probably for the 4 years that we've been doing boundary studies. I just believe that it was a neighborhood school, and it was really brought by a community member when we were talking about we're trying to buy a house and they didn't know where they're going to go and all the implications that goes with that. So I'm very happy that we do have a boundary that the committee worked on, and I think they learned a lot from what they said. And these are people that would be very outspoken if they didn't like it. They would not hold back. And so I think it was great. And actually, it was a lady at the first meeting, as she walked past me, she said, "You need to pass this." So it gave me good encouragement because I think it was one of the first time she'd been at a meeting similar to something like this and was engaged with it. And she was very happy with what was going on. So again, I commend you in listening to the people. I was at the meeting at Goodrow in April, and it was very lively. And I think that people's voices were heard, and I think that we reacted to that. And this is the plan that we have because of that. So I appreciate the work you guys did and the committee.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Everything they said, and thank you, but definitely thanks to that parent ad hoc committee. I was at the meeting last night, incredibly impressed with the amount of information and the way that they answered a lot of the questions. They did a lot of that work, of that Q&A work, and I think that's just shows the amount of information and knowledge that they were given and the amount of ownership that they had in that process. And I do think that it was a good process, and I appreciate that. So thanks to them. If you could definitely pass that along.
I shall.
Any further comment, question? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, there's no action on that item, though we will revisit it at our next meeting. Next item on the agenda is board development. I will intro this piece. So the board essentially over the last 2 months has been working at work sessions to crystallize our efforts around one facet of our work in an attempt, one or two, and we've seemed to have come to one facet of our work to better drive the best outcomes for student achievement in our district. And so the result of that plan is a 2016 work plan that that I drafted, submitted to the board a couple weeks ago with action steps that really only take us through the first 2 months of this plan, but yet is still rather extensive for that work. At our last meeting, which was our work session after the January 5 meeting, we kind of came around vision for better community engagement, led by the board, and so taking what we discussed at prior meetings and trying to pull it all into one coherent and essentially long sentence. The idea is that the board will improve community engagement through intentional and innovative activities with the one goal of increasing student achievement through educating more members of the community on their and our roles and responsibilities, and through conveying the successes and realities of our students' educational experiences. Now, turning my attention towards my colleagues, when I sent this around about 10, 11 days ago, I said, this is the plan, give me your thoughts. I got a couple people who volunteered for some roles, and so those are reflected on this chart. Some assigned roles are also reflected on this chart, but I tried to spread the responsibility out as evenly as possible, but I'll open the conversation. The idea here is to do two things, really. One is to move us towards better community engagement, and the second one is to clear up points of discussion that we have had at work sessions over the last couple months, which are really a part of and have to be addressed as part of better community engagement. Everything has an end date, the latest possible end date being our next board meeting. The goal and expectation here from me, of both myself and of this board, is that we work concurrently in small groups to advance items and make progress, so that we can best utilize our shared abilities and time and resources. So I'll open the discussion to my colleagues.
One thing I would volunteer to help Connie on the professional development, and if that would work, and with an eye on perhaps getting some of that, some of the things that we talked about even tonight early on the calendar to get us into a place that we want to be for the governance and monitoring of the board, and then to be able to move into the direction that we want to go. So I would love to help with that.
I'm taking volunteers, and it's my intention to fill every single one of these subcommittees by the end of this night, so you're on.
Thank you.
Deal. On creating a recommendation for the board's consideration concerning board staff interaction policy and share it with the board. Fantastic. I'm adding Deanna to
Interest?
yes, developing a conflict of interest policy. Fantastic.
How many do we all need?
Looks like we've got a few spots. So,
I'll join Connie and Cindy on the
professional development?
Yes.
Fantastic. We have a full subcommittee. Fantastic. Who would like to work with Natasha and Terry on researching effective community engagement strategies?
Oh, I can too. It doesn't.
Oh. Who was it? We had joint nominations here. I saw you first, so I'm just going to automatically go with Connie.
Okay.
And then where's the other gap?
We're gonna meet in Clive.
Lost track.
We need someone down here.
I will volunteer myself to help with Deanna and Tasha on the board staff interaction policy, if that helps move things along, if you wish.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to volunteer myself to help on the board staff interaction policy, and then one more lucky volunteer to help us fill out the committee to move us forward on the conflict of interest policy.
Conflict of interest.
Fantastic. All right, so I will recirculate this document with everyone, but I'm just going to rattle through this very quickly. We can still continue to discuss it, but I want folks to know what I'm looking at, which is the board over the next week will research effective community engagement strategies, finding no fewer than 5 relevant practices. I know that the Council for Great City Schools is a tremendous resource, and I would start there. I think they can give you plenty, but there's also other resources. The goal is to complete that work by a week from today. We're also going to have a subcommittee work on professional development, starting a calendar for retreats, identifying at least 3 outlets to provide professional development. Those have 2 different dates, that either a week or 2 weeks from now. Legislative Education Advisory Committee, that's actually a pre-populated committee, and I effectively put Cindy in as chair for the moment until that committee meets and develops its own structure. But we'd like to have that meeting announcement, call for the meeting within the next week, including holding the first meeting, and creating a recommendation for the board on the board staff interaction policy. That will occur by the 26th. Same thing as the conflict of interest policy. And then the idea here is to bring any substantive changes for editing of the policy governance manual back to the board's next meeting. And then the board at that point in time can discuss as a full board and then delegate that out to the policy governance subcommittee to do follow-up work if necessary. I also want to push the conversation about the entirety of our board governance policy at that time, at that meeting, so we can, this is one of those issues that as a board, we need to address, come to consensus in terms of what this board wants, and then start moving forward before we can go out to the community. And then I'd also like to see the professional development and community engagement strategy shared within the next week. Those do not necessarily have to be shared at the board table in 2 weeks, but Terry and I could discuss that tomorrow at agenda planning. Thoughts, questions? Lovely. I appreciate everyone's willingness to work and push forward on this stuff. And we'll turn back to the community to say that the idea and intent of this work is to thoughtfully but strategically, but also urgently turn our attention where we think it's critical, with a focus on increasing student achievement, because that's why we're all on here. So appreciate everyone's input and help here. And there's no action on this item, so I will move towards our next item, which is items of privilege, and I will start with the chair's report. Not very much, I'm going to keep it quick, but I did have the opportunity to attend a meeting sponsored by a statewide organization, but just happened to occur in Des Moines, of Latino youth, and it ended up being like a caucus training, but it was really interesting, and it was great to see upwards of 80 young Latinos from around the state meeting in the same room, and I'm glad that they came to Des Moines to do it, because we were really the place. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent.
In the interest of time, I'll forego a superintendent's report tonight so we can get to our guest from Gallup a little bit sooner.
May we have
Fantastic. All right. Yes, before I gavel out, I'll say that we'll take a 5-minute break. It is 8:46 on my computer. We will be back. I'll give you guys 6 minutes. We'll be back at 8:52 with Tim from Gallup for that report. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for braving the snow.